The space monitoring station floated in the darkness near Neptune. It was quiet, as it had been for months. Commander Lisa Stone sat at her desk, drinking coffee and checking the daily reports. Nothing unusual ever happened this far from Earth. The job was boring but safe. Then her console beeped. Lisa looked at the screen and nearly dropped her coffee mug. The identification code on her screen was impossible. She blinked and looked again. The code belonged to the UES Pioneer, a colony ship that had disappeared 17 years ago. 8,000 people had been on that ship when it vanished. No debris, no distress signal, nothing. They just disappeared. Lisa's hands shook as she double-checked the data. The signal was real. The Pioneer was transmitting its location and heading straight for Earth. She grabbed her communication device and called Earth Defense Force headquarters. Captain Jake Murphy was sleeping when the call came. He was the night shift commander at TU, Earth Defense Force, and he expected another routine evening. The moment he heard about the Pioneer, he jumped out of bed and ran to the command center. His team was already gathering data from every sensor they had. The readings made no sense. The Pioneer was moving at nearly the speed of light, but it was slowing down without using any engines they could detect. The ship's mass was 40% heavier than it should be. Strange energy readings came from it, types of energy that Earth scientists had never seen before. Jake ordered all defensive weapons to track the ship but not to fire. They needed more information. He sent messages to wake up every important military and scientific leader on Earth. This was the biggest event in human history. As the Pioneer came closer, they got their first visual images. Jake stared at his screen in shock. The ship looked nothing like it had when it left. The original metal hull was covered in some kind of crystal material. The crystals moved and shifted like they were alive. Patterns of light flowed across the surface. Sometimes parts of the ship would disappear and reappear, as if it was shifting between dimensions. Admiral Ruth Cooper arrived at the command center within an hour. She was a tough woman who had led Earth's defense forces for 10 years. But today, her face was pale. Her daughter Amy had been on the Pioneer. Amy was a young engineer, only 25 when the ship left. Ruth had accepted long ago that her daughter was dead. The Admiral's staff argued about what to do. Some wanted to destroy the ship immediately. It could be a trap, they said. Maybe aliens had taken the ship and were using it to attack Earth. Others wanted to wait and gather more information. Ruth listened to all of them, but her mind was already made up. She opened a communication channel to the Pioneer. Everyone in the command center held their breath. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through the speakers. It sounded human, but had a strange echo to it, like multiple people speaking at once. Earth Control, this is the Pioneer. We have returned from the void between spaces. We bring gifts and warnings. Permission to approach. Jake felt his skin crawl. The voice was calm, too calm. Nobody who had been missing for 17 years should sound that relaxed. He looked at Admiral Cooper, waiting for her decision. Ruth stood silent for a long moment. Every instinct told her this was dangerous, but if there was even a small chance her daughter was alive, she had to know. She picked up the microphone. Pioneer, this is Admiral Ruth Cooper, Earth Defense Force. Identify yourself. Who is speaking? The response came immediately. Admiral Cooper, this is Captain Ben Carter. I commanded the Pioneer when we left Earth. I know this is difficult to believe, but we're all here. All 8,000 of us, we're alive and we're coming home. The command center erupted in chaos. People shouted questions and arguments. How could they all be alive? Where had they been? What happened to them? Jake tried to restore order while Ruth stood frozen, gripping the microphone. Captain Carter, Ruth said slowly. My daughter Amy Cooper was on your ship. Is she alive? Yes, Admiral. Amy is here and she's well. She's changed, we all have. But she's alive. She wants you to know she loves you and can't wait to see you again. Ruth's legs nearly gave out. Jake caught her arm and helped her to a chair. Around them, the staff continued arguing about protocols and safety measures. But Ruth only cared about one thing. Her daughter was coming home. The Pioneer continued its approach to Earth. Every telescope and satellite turned to watch it. The crystal covering pulsed with colors that human eyes had never seen. Scientists recorded energy signatures that broke their understanding of physics. The ship moved in ways that should have been impossible, turning without thrust, stopping without deceleration forces. As it came closer to Earth's moon, the Pioneer sent another message. This time, it was video. The screen showed Captain Ben Carter standing on what looked like the ship's bridge. But the bridge was wrong. The walls were made of the same crystal material as the outside of the ship. Lights moved through the crystals like blood through veins, and Captain Carter looked exactly the same as he had 17 years ago. He hadn't aged a single day. "Earth Control," Carter said, his image flickering slightly. "We request permission to dock at Luna Station. We understand you have concerns. We're prepared to submit to any quarantine procedures you require. But please understand time is limited. We have information Earth needs to hear. The human race is in danger." Jake looked at the faces around him. Fear, excitement, confusion, and hope mixed in every expression. They were standing at the edge of something huge, something that would change everything. The lost ship had returned, but it brought mysteries that might transform or destroy everything they knew. Admiral Cooper stood up, her decision made. "Pioneer, you have permission to dock at Luna Station Quarantine Bay 7. You will submit to full medical scans and questioning. Any resistance will be met with force, do you understand?" "We understand completely, Admiral. We won't resist. We're here to help. The architects sent us back to prepare Earth for what's coming." The channel closed, leaving everyone with more questions. Who or what were the architects? What was coming? How had the crew survived? And why did they look so young? Lisa Stone watched from her station near Neptune as the Pioneer passed by. Up close, it was even more impossible. The crystals weren't just covering the ship. They were part of it. The metal and crystal had merged at a molecular level. She could see figures moving inside through translucent sections. They looked human, but something was different about how they moved. Too smooth, too coordinated. The Pioneer arrived at Luna Station 6 hours later. The quarantine bay was surrounded by armed guards and medical teams. Every weapon Earth had was pointed at the ship, ready to fire if anything went wrong. Scientists prepared every scanner and test they could think of. As the ship docked using some kind of gravity control that made the station's engineers shake their heads in confusion, everyone waited. The airlock sealed with a soft hiss. Then, the door opened. Captain Ben Carter stepped out first, hands raised to show he meant no harm. He looked exactly like his photos from 17 years ago. Behind him, other crew members emerged. They all looked young, healthy, and calm. Too calm for people who had been missing for so long. The medical teams moved forward with their scanners. The readings confirmed what seemed impossible. These were the same people who had left Earth. Their DNA matched perfectly. But brain scans showed activity in parts of the brain that normally stayed dormant. Something had changed them at a fundamental level. Captain Carter smiled at the nervous guards and scientists. "I know you have questions. We have answers. But first, you need to understand that we're not the same people who left. We've evolved. And if humanity is going to survive what's coming, you'll need to evolve too." The quarantine zone at Luna Station had been built to handle dangerous diseases or alien contamination. It had never held 8,000 people who looked perfectly healthy, but claimed to have traveled through impossible dimensions. The medical teams worked around the clock, running test after test on the Pioneer's crew. Dr. Paul Harris led the medical examination team. He was Earth's best specialist in space medicine, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. Every scan he ran showed the same impossible results. The crew members were human. Their DNA matched their records exactly, but their brains showed activity that shouldn't exist. Normal human brains used about 10% of their full capacity at any given moment. The Pioneer crew's brains were running at nearly 60%, with neural pathways lighting up in regions that had been dormant since humans evolved from earlier primates. Even stranger, their brain patterns seemed to sync up when they were near each other, like multiple computers connecting to the same network. Captain Ben Carter sat calmly as Dr. Harris attached more sensors to his head. The captain hadn't complained once during 12 hours of tests. He hadn't asked for food, water, or even a bathroom break. When Paul mentioned this, Carter just smiled. "Our bodies work differently now," Carter explained. "We process energy and waste more efficiently. I could go weeks without eating if necessary, though food still tastes good. The architects improved us in many ways." Paul set down his tablet and looked directly at Carter. "These architects, who are they exactly? Where did you meet them?" Carter's eyes seemed to look through Paul, focusing on something far away. 3 days after we left Earth, by our count, something grabbed our ship. Not physically, but space. Itself bent around us. We got pulled sideways out of normal space into something else. The crew was terrified. Some people thought we were dead, that we'd hit a black hole. He paused, and other crew members nearby turned to listen, as if they could hear his thoughts. But we weren't dead. We were in the between, a place that exists in the gaps of reality. The architects live there. They're not physical beings like us. They're consciousness without form, thought without matter. They've existed since the universe was young, maybe before it. Dr. Harris wrote notes, trying to stay scientific and skeptical, but Carter's certainty was unsettling. And these beings just decided to help humanity? They've been watching Earth for centuries, Carter continued. They watch all species that develop space travel. Most civilizations destroy themselves or get destroyed by others. But humans showed them something different. We're chaotic, violent, and primitive by their standards, but we also have something unique. We can hold multiple contradictory ideas in our minds without breaking. We can believe in science and faith, love and hate, order and chaos all at once. The architects found that fascinating. A younger crew member, Katie Ross, walked over to join them. Paul recognized her from the crew manifest. She had been an engineer, fresh out of university when the Pioneer launched. She should be in her 40s now, but she looked 25. "Show 'em what we can do," Katie said to Carter. "Words aren't enough. They need to see." Carter nodded. He stood up and walked to a metal table in the corner of the medical bay. He placed his hand on it, and Paul watched in shock as the metal began to flow like water. The table reshaped itself, forming into a complex sculpture of the Pioneer, perfect in every detail down to individual bolts. Katie stepped forward and touched the sculpture. The metal changed again, this time forming into a working model of Earth's solar system, with tiny planets orbiting a glowing miniature sun. The demonstration lasted only seconds, but it shattered everything Paul understood about physics. "How?" was all Paul could manage to say. "Consciousness affects reality at the quantum level," Katie explained. "Earth scientists have known this for decades but couldn't use it practically. The architects taught us how to focus our consciousness, to reach down to the quantum foam that underlies everything and reshape it. It takes enormous mental energy, and we're still learning, but the possibilities are endless." Paul's medical scanner was going crazy, showing energy readings from Katie's brain that should have killed her. But she stood there smiling, not even breathing hard. He realized that whatever these people had become, they weren't entirely human anymore. Admiral Cooper arrived at the quarantine zone with a full military escort. She had waited as long as she could, but she needed to see her daughter. The guards led her to a section where the younger Pioneer crew members were being held. Amy Cooper stood by a window, looking out at Earth in the distance. She turned when her mother entered, and Ruth's heart nearly stopped. Amy looked exactly as she had when she left, young and bright-eyed, but there was something different in her expression. She seemed older, wiser, sadder somehow. "Mom," Amy said, and her voice had that same strange harmonic quality that all the returned crew had. Ruth ran to her daughter and pulled her into a tight hug. Amy hugged back, but Ruth could feel the difference. Amy's skin was slightly warm, as if she had a fever, and Ruth could swear she felt a slight electric tingle where they touched. "I thought I'd lost you forever," Ruth whispered, tears running down her face. "I'm sorry, Mom. We tried to send messages, but nothing could cross between the between and normal space." Time works differently there. For us, it's only been about 3 years. We had no idea 17 years had passed on Earth. They sat down, together, and Amy tried to explain what had happened. She talked about the architects, the transformation, the new abilities. She demonstrated by making her hand glow with soft light, then creating small objects out of thin air, pulling matter from quantum probability clouds. But then Amy's expression turned serious. "Mom, we need to talk about why the architects sent us back. They've been protecting younger civilizations for eons, but something has gone wrong. There are things in the universe that consume entire star systems. The architects call them the Devourers." Ruth listened as her daughter explained the threat. The Devourers were like cosmic viruses, spreading from galaxy to galaxy, eating everything in their path. Not just planets and stars, but the very fabric of space itself. They left nothing behind, not even empty space, just voids where nothing could ever exist again. "They're coming here," Amy said quietly. "Maybe 5 years, maybe less. The architects gave us these abilities so we could prepare Earth. But the changes, Mom, to fight them, humanity will need to change. Not everyone will want to." The next day, Earth's leadership gathered for an emergency session. Presidents, generals, and scientists from every nation watched as Captain Carter and his senior crew presented their evidence. They showed holographic recordings from the Between, images of the architects that looked like geometric patterns made of pure thought. They demonstrated technologies that could solve every problem on Earth: unlimited clean energy, instant healing of any disease, faster than light travel. But they also showed images of the Devourers, black wounds in space that grew larger with each star system they consumed. Recordings from civilizations that had tried to fight them and failed. Entire species wiped from existence, their planets not destroyed but erased, as if they had never been. The room erupted in arguments. Some leaders demanded immediate access to the new technology. Others feared it was all an elaborate trap. Religious leaders called it either divine intervention or satanic deception. Scientists wanted to study everything. Military commanders wanted weapons. Dr. Nancy Green, Earth's leading xenobiologist, raised a critical concern. "You're asking us to trust that these changes are benign, but from what I can see, you're no longer entirely human. You're connected to each other in ways that suggest a hive mind. How do we know you haven't been programmed by these architects to convert humanity into something else?" Captain Carter stood to address her concern. "You're right to be suspicious. Yes, we're connected. I can sense every member of my crew right now, feel their emotions, share their thoughts if they allow it. But we're still individuals. We still have free will. The connection is a tool, not a chain." To demonstrate, several crew members stood up and had a complex conversation without speaking aloud, their thoughts flowing between them instantly. Then they stopped and returned to normal speech, each maintaining their distinct personality and opinions. "The choice will be yours," Carter said to the assembly. "We won't force anyone to change. But without these enhancements, when the Devourers arrive, humanity as you know it will end. We're offering evolution, not extinction." Frank Davis, one of the Pioneer's original colonists, stepped forward to give a more dramatic demonstration. He was a middle-aged man who had been a teacher before joining the colony mission. Now he stood before Earth's most powerful leaders, with quiet confidence. "Let me show you what the consciousness connection really means," he said. He placed his hand on the conference table, and suddenly every screen in the room came alive. They showed what Frank was experiencing. He could feel every electronic system in the building, sense every heartbeat, hear every whispered conversation. For a moment, everyone in the room could see through his perception. They felt the vast network of human consciousness that the Pioneer crew shared. Thousands of minds linked but distinct, like instruments in an orchestra. Then Frank pulled back. And within weeks of the Pioneers' return, Earth split into factions. The division cut through families, governments, and religions. In New York, massive rallies filled the streets. The progressives carried signs reading "Evolve or Die," while the purists chanted "Preserve human nature." Violence broke out daily between the groups. The first enhancement clinic opened in Geneva, Switzerland, under heavy military guard. Dr. Ellen White and her team from the Pioneer had refined the process. The nanites could be injected in a simple procedure, but the transformation took 72 hours. During that time, the person would experience their consciousness expanding, feeling every atom in their body reorganizing. The first volunteer was Maria Santos, a woman dying from terminal cancer. Her family had begged for the treatment when conventional medicine failed. The world watched through news feeds as she received the injection. For 3 days, she writhed in what looked like agony, but what she later described as being rebuilt from the inside out. When she emerged, her cancer was gone. She looked 20 years younger, and she could calculate complex mathematical equations instantly in her head. But Maria was also different. She spoke of hearing a background hum of other enhanced humans' thoughts. She could sense electronics around her like a sixth sense. When she touched her husband, who remained unenhanced, she said it felt like touching someone through thick glass. The connection they once had seemed muted, distant. This pattern repeated with every enhancement. The transformed humans gained incredible abilities but lost something indefinable in their relationships with unchanged people. Families began to divide between those who took the enhancement and those who refused. In Washington, President Robert Lane faced an impossible decision. His advisors were split. General Patricia Hill argued that America needed enhanced soldiers to maintain military superiority. Dr. Carl Peterson warned that they might be creating a new species that would view regular humans as inferior. Economic advisor Jennifer Kim pointed out that enhanced humans could solve every technological and scientific challenge facing the nation. The president called in Frank Davis for a private demonstration. Davis had become the unofficial ambassador between enhanced and regular humans. In the Oval Office, with only the president and his closest advisors present, Davis did something that changed everything. He touched the president's hand and, with permission, created a temporary link between their minds. For just a moment, President Lane experienced what Davis felt, the vast network of consciousness, the ability to perceive reality at the quantum level, the overwhelming sense of connection to the universe itself. When the link broke, the president sat in stunned silence. For 10 minutes. "It's not just enhancement," the president finally said. "It's becoming something entirely different." The debate raged in Congress for weeks. Senator Charles Wright led the opposition, calling the enhancements an alien contamination that would destroy human free will. Senator Lisa Park argued that refusing the technology would doom humanity when the devourers arrived. The vote was scheduled for the end of the month. Meanwhile, Captain Carter and his crew began constructing humanity's new defense fleet. Using technology from the architects, they set up fabrication stations on the moon. These weren't factories in any traditional sense. Instead, enhanced humans would touch special crystalline matrices and guide matter to assemble itself into ship components. The process was beautiful and terrifying to watch. Katie Ross stood in the lunar fabrication facility, her hands on a growth matrix. Around her, atoms pulled themselves from raw materials and arranged into perfect patterns. A ship's hull grew like a plant, crystalline and metallic structures, interweaving. What would have taken years with conventional technology took days. But the ships were strange. They weren't built for human crews in the traditional sense. Instead, they were meant to merge with enhanced human consciousness. A pilot wouldn't fly the ship. They would become the ship, their awareness expanding through every system. The weapons weren't fired by pushing buttons, but by focused thought, channeling energy through consciousness itself. Dr. Nancy Green published a paper that shook the scientific community. She had been studying the enhanced humans and discovered they were beginning to share information at a quantum level without conscious intent. When one enhanced human learned something new, others would suddenly understand it too, even if they were on opposite sides of the planet. They were becoming a collective intelligence while still maintaining individual personalities. "We're witnessing the birth of a new species," she wrote. "Homo sapiens is branching into Homo conscientious. The question isn't whether this is good or bad, but whether both branches can coexist." The enhanced humans insisted they meant no harm to regular humans. They demonstrated repeatedly that they maintained free will and individual thought. But incidents began to occur that raised concerns. In Tokyo, an enhanced human named Yuki Tanaka accidentally connected to the city's entire power grid during an emotional moment. For 3 minutes, every electronic device in a 6-block radius operated according to her subconscious thoughts. Traffic lights changed randomly, computers typed out her feelings, and phones called random numbers. She hadn't meant to do it. It just happened when she lost control. In London, a group of enhanced humans met to discuss philosophy. Without meaning to, their connected consciousness created a localized field that affected everyone nearby. Regular humans reported feeling an overwhelming sense of connection and understanding, but also a loss of individual thought. Some described it as beautiful, others as terrifying. Amy Cooper worked to bridge the gap between enhanced and regular humans. She created training programs to help enhanced humans control their abilities and support groups for families dealing with the division. But she could see the fear in people's eyes when she approached. Even her own mother, Admiral Cooper, sometimes looked at her with uncertainty. The construction of the defense fleet accelerated when long-range sensors detected something wrong at the edge of the galaxy. Stars were disappearing, not just dying but vanishing from existence. The pattern matched what the architects had shown them. The Devourers were moving faster than expected. Captain Carter called an emergency meeting with Earth's leaders. Using holographic projections, he showed them the advancing void. At their current rate, the Devourers would reach Earth in 3 years, not 5. We need at least 30% of humanity enhanced to mount an effective defense, Carter explained. The consciousness network needs critical mass to create a barrier the Devourers can't consume. With less than that, we'll be overwhelmed. Currently, only about 50,000 humans had taken the enhancement, mostly those who were dying or those who fully trusted the Pioneer crew. To reach 30% meant convincing 3 billion people to fundamentally change their nature. Religious leaders worldwide struggled with the theological implications. Pope Francis held a special conclave to discuss whether enhanced humans still had souls. The Dalai Lama spoke of consciousness evolution as a path to enlightenment. Islamic scholars debated whether the transformation was Allah's will or a test of faith. In the midst of this chaos, something unexpected happened. Danny Chen, a 12-year-old boy with leukemia, became the youngest person to receive the enhancement. His parents had agreed out of desperation to save his life, but Danny's young brain adapted to the enhancement differently than adults. While adult enhanced humans struggled to control their expanded consciousness, Danny did it naturally. He could shift between individual and collective thought as easily as breathing. He played games with the consciousness network, creating art that existed only in linked minds, composing music that could only be heard by enhanced humans. More importantly, Danny discovered something the adults had missed. The enhancement didn't have to be all or nothing. He learned to dial his consciousness connection up or down, maintaining stronger links with regular humans when he toned down his enhancement. He became a bridge between the two groups. Danny's discovery changed the debate. If enhanced humans could modulate their connection, maybe coexistence was possible. Enhancement clinics began teaching Danny's techniques, and families found they could maintain relationships across the divide. But time was running out. The void at the galaxy's edge grew larger each day. Telescopes showed star systems vanishing, in waves, each one erased from existence as if it had never been. Refugee ships from other civilizations began arriving at Earth's borders, desperate species fleeing the advancing destruction. Some of these aliens were also enhanced by the architects, sharing the same consciousness network as human enhanced. First contact became a strange mix of terror and wonder as humans suddenly found alien thoughts mixing with their own in the network. The refugees brought terrible news. Every defense they had tried had failed. Weapons, shields, even attempts to flee to other dimensions had all been useless. The only hope, they said, was what the architects had told humanity. Consciousness itself was the key. The Devourers consumed matter, energy, and space, but they couldn't consume awareness that existed across multiple quantum states. Earth's growing network might be the last chance for multiple species. The stars began disappearing from Earth's night sky. Not all at once, but in patches like dead pixels on a screen. Most people didn't notice at first, but astronomers watched in horror as entire constellations vanished. The Devourers had entered. The Milky Way. Commander Lisa Stone, now enhanced and captain of the ship Transcendence, led the first reconnaissance mission to investigate. Her ship wasn't made of metal and circuits anymore. It was grown from crystalline matrices infused with her consciousness. She didn't pilot the ship, she was the ship. Every sensor was her eye, every weapon her hand. Her fleet included 12 other consciousness-merged ships. Together they folded space and appeared at the edge of the solar system where the void was approaching. What Lisa found there broke her understanding of reality. The Devourers weren't ships or creatures. They were wounds in existence itself. Where they passed, space didn't just empty, it ceased. The fundamental information that defined reality was being deleted. Lisa tried to scan them, but her sensors returned nothing. Not zero readings, but null values, as if the universe's operating system couldn't process what was there. She watched a small asteroid drift too close to the void. It didn't explode or get crushed. One moment it existed, the next it didn't, and reality reorganized itself as if the asteroid had never been. The atoms that made it up weren't destroyed. They were unwritten from the code of existence. Lisa sent a probe closer, maintaining a quantum entanglement link to observe. As the probe approached the void's edge, the link began to fracture, not breaking but becoming undefined. The last data she received wasn't readings but a concept that her enhanced mind could barely grasp. Unbecoming. The fleet retreated to a safe distance to plan. Through the consciousness network, Lisa shared her findings with every enhanced human instantly. The collective intelligence of millions of enhanced minds began working on the problem simultaneously. Back on Earth, the situation was deteriorating. Only 18% of humanity had taken the enhancement, far short of the 30% Captain Carter said they needed. The purist movement had grown violent. In several countries, civil wars had broken out between enhanced and regular humans. Dr. Paul Harris remained unenhanced by choice. He believed someone needed to stay fully human to maintain perspective. He worked in a special hospital that treated both types of humans, trying to keep families together across the divide. But he saw the fear growing on both sides. Enhanced humans moved and thought faster than regular humans. They solved problems instantly that would take normal people hours. They didn't need much sleep or food. Some enhanced humans began to see regular humans as slow, limited, almost like children. Meanwhile, regular humans felt like they were becoming obsolete, replaced by a superior species. The consciousness network itself was evolving beyond what anyone expected. Enhanced humans weren't just sharing thoughts, they were beginning to share experiences and memories. A farmer in Kansas could suddenly access the knowledge of a physicist in Tokyo. Children who took the enhancement gained decades of life experience in days. Danny Chen, the 12-year-old who had pioneered consciousness modulation, made another discovery. He found that groups of enhanced humans thinking together could affect probability at the quantum level. Not just reshaping matter like they already could, but actually changing the likelihood of events occurring. He demonstrated this at a scientific conference. With 30 enhanced humans focusing together, they made a quantum random number generator produce specific patterns 100% of the time. They were changing the fundamental randomness of the universe through collective will. Captain Ben Carter saw the implications immediately. This might be their weapon against the Devourers. If the void creatures deleted information from reality, perhaps focused consciousness could write it back, or create barriers of probability they couldn't consume. But they needed more enhanced humans. The network's power grew exponentially with numbers. With only 18% enhanced, they could barely affect local quantum events. To stop the Devourers, they needed enough minds to influence probability on a cosmic scale. President Lane, now enhanced himself, made a controversial decision. He signed an executive order making enhancement mandatory for all military personnel. Other nations followed suit. Soldiers were given a choice: enhance or retire. Most chose enhancement, but thousands refused, creating a crisis in Earth's defense forces. The first major battle between enhanced and regular humans happened in Brazil. A purist army attacked an enhancement center, trying to destroy the nanite supplies. Enhanced human defenders didn't use weapons. Instead, they reached out with their consciousness and shut down the attackers' nervous systems temporarily, paralyzing them without permanent harm. The demonstration of power terrified regular humans worldwide. Amy Cooper worked desperately to prevent full civil war. She organized mixed councils with both enhanced and regular humans, trying to find common ground. But every day the gap widened. Enhanced humans were beginning to communicate entirely through thought, finding spoken language, slow and limited. Regular humans felt increasingly excluded from important decisions made in milliseconds through the consciousness network. Then the refugees arrived in greater numbers. Dozens of alien species fleeing the devourers, some enhanced by the architects, others not. The enhanced aliens merged easily into Earth's consciousness network, their thoughts mixing with human ones. But their memories brought horror. They shared visions of their worlds being unmade, billions of years of evolution, culture, and history erased in moments. The devourers didn't kill. They removed the possibility of something having existed. Parents watched children vanish not just from reality but from memory. Only the enhanced consciousness network preserving any record they had ever been. One refugee, a crystalline being that called itself the Sage of Corthan, revealed crucial information. The devourers were once a species like any other, billions of years ago. They had tried to achieve ultimate transcendence, to become one with the universe itself. But something went wrong. Instead of merging with reality, they fell through it, becoming anti-existence itself. They consumed everything, trying to fill a void that could never be filled. The Sage had fought them for millennia, watching 100 civilizations fall. It had seen every weapon fail, every strategy crumble. Only once had it seen the devourers, stopped briefly, when an entire species linked their consciousness and created a probability barrier. But that species hadn't been strong enough. They held the void back for days before being consumed. Earth's only chance was to succeed where others had failed. But time was running out. Long-range sensors showed the void accelerating, drawn to consciousness like a hungry predator. Earth had perhaps 6 months before the devourers arrived. Captain Carter proposed a desperate plan. They would force enhancement on the entire population. Nanite clouds would be released into the atmosphere, transforming everyone simultaneously. It would save humanity but destroy free will. The debate raged through the consciousness network in nanoseconds, millions of minds arguing at the speed of thought. The vote was close, but the plan was rejected. Even facing extinction, the enhanced humans wouldn't force their evolution on others, but they agreed to make one last attempt at voluntary conversion. Every enhanced human reached out to someone they loved who remained unchanged. Not with force, but with pure emotional connection. They shared not just the benefits of enhancement, but their genuine fear of losing everything. Parents pleaded with children, friends with friends, lovers with lovers. The moment was broadcast globally as Danny Chen demonstrated a gentler enhancement process he had developed. The transformation could be gradual, taking weeks instead of days, allowing people to adjust slowly. The connection to the network could be controlled, maintaining privacy and individuality. Slowly, more people volunteered. The percentage crept up, 20%, 22, 25. But it wasn't enough. Mathematical models showed they needed at least 28% to have any chance, and 30% to be safe. In desperation, Lisa Stone took her reconnaissance fleet deeper into the void, trying to understand the enemy better. What she found changed everything. At the heart of the void, she detected something impossible. Patterns of consciousness, fragmented and insane but still aware. The devourers weren't mindless forces. They were conscious beings trapped in endless suffering, consuming reality in a desperate attempt to rebuild themselves. They remembered what they had been, and that memory drove them to destroy everything else. Lisa tried to communicate, sending a message of consciousness through the quantum foam. The response nearly destroyed her. Pain beyond description flooded. Through her, the agony of a billion minds that had tried to become God and instead became nothing. But in that pain, she heard something else. A plea for help. She raced back to Earth with this information. The Devourers weren't just destroyers, they were victims of their own transcendence attempt. And if they were conscious, perhaps they could be healed rather than fought. Danny Chen, with his unique young perspective, saw what adults couldn't. The Devourers were like a corrupted computer program, stuck in an infinite loop of destruction. They needed to be debugged, not deleted. But, debugging reality itself, the final day arrived with an empty sky. Every star visible from Earth had been consumed, leaving only the sun hanging in absolute darkness. The void had reached the outer planets. Neptune simply ceased, then Uranus, then Saturn's rings unraveled, into nothing as the planet itself was deleted from existence. 31% of humanity had accepted enhancement, just above the minimum threshold. 3 billion minds linked in the consciousness network, preparing for something no species had survived. The enhanced humans stood together, not physically but mentally, their awareness spreading through quantum dimensions regular humans couldn't perceive. Danny Chen had become the focal point of the network despite being only 12 years old. His young mind could hold patterns that adults couldn't, seeing solutions in what others saw as chaos. He stood in the command center on the moon, surrounded by both enhanced and regular humans, his consciousness stretched across the solar system. Everyone needs to understand, Danny said, his voice carrying through speakers and directly into enhanced minds simultaneously. We're not fighting them. We're going to try to heal them. When I make contact, every enhanced human will feel what they feel. It will be the pain of a billion years of suffering. If we break, if we let go, everything ends. Dr. Paul Harris, still unenhanced, monitored the medical readings of enhanced humans worldwide. Their brain activity was synchronizing, billions of neural patterns aligning into a single massive consciousness while somehow maintaining individual identity. It should have been impossible, but the architect's modifications made it real. Admiral Ruth Cooper commanded the traditional defense forces, knowing her weapons were useless, but needing to maintain order among the 2 billion humans who remained unenhanced. They could only watch and wait, hoping the enhanced could save them all. The void reached Mars. The red planet didn't explode or crumble. It simply wasn't anymore. The space it had occupied became undefined, a gap in reality that hurt to perceive. The refugee aliens huddled on Earth shared their species' final prayers, knowing they had nowhere left to run. Captain Ben Carter, his consciousness spread through 100 linked ships, formed the first barrier. The fleet created a mesh of probability around Earth, using their collective will to reinforce the concept of Earth's existence. It was like holding back an ocean with thoughts alone. Lisa Stone pushed her awareness into the void itself, becoming the communication channel. What she found there was worse than before. The Devourers weren't one consciousness but trillions, the remains of an entire civilization that had tried to merge with the universe and instead fell through it. Each mind was trapped in endless agony, experiencing the moment of their failed transcendence for eternity. Now, Danny said simply. Every enhanced human reached out simultaneously, their consciousness flowing through Lisa into the void. For regular humans watching, their enhanced friends and family members stood frozen, eyes rolled back, barely breathing. For the enhanced, reality exploded into impossible experience. They felt it all. The moment an ancient civilization tried to become one with existence, the mathematics of their transcendence, perfect in theory but containing one tiny flaw. The instant when instead of merging with reality, they slipped beneath it, becoming undefined, unbeing, nothing and everything simultaneously. The billions of years of trying to claw back to existence by consuming other realities, hoping to find the pattern that would make them real again. The pain was beyond description. Enhanced humans across Earth screamed in unison, their minds touching the infinite suffering of the devourers. Many wanted to pull back, to break the connection, but Danny held them together, his young consciousness somehow able to bear what adults couldn't. Don't fight the pain, Danny broadcast through the network. Accept it. Understand it. They're not evil. They're broken. They're scared. They've been falling forever and just want to stop. Amy Cooper felt her individuality dissolving, her consciousness merging not just with humanity, but with the alien horror of the devourers. She experienced memories of their civilization before the fall, beings of light and thought who had created art from galaxies, composed symphonies from pulsar rhythms. They had been beautiful once. The devourers felt the contact and recoiled. They had consumed millions of civilizations, but none had ever reached out to them with compassion. None had ever tried to understand. Through Lisa Stone, Danny sent a simple message. We can help you remember who you were. For 17 minutes and 43 seconds, 3 billion human minds merged completely with trillions of devourer consciousnesses. Regular humans watched their enhanced loved ones standing perfectly still, tears streaming down their faces, some laughing, some sobbing, all experiencing something beyond normal human comprehension. Frank Davis, his consciousness expanded beyond individual identity, found himself experiencing the universe from the devourer's perspective. He understood their hunger wasn't for destruction but for definition, for the reality they had lost. They consumed worlds trying to find the equation that would make them exist again. Katie Ross, her ship consciousness interfacing directly with the void, began transmitting something impossible. The mathematical formula for existence itself, pulled from the collective understanding of the merged consciousness. It was the missing piece the devourers had been searching for across eons. But the formula alone wasn't enough. The devourers were too damaged, too fragmented to use it. They needed structure, a framework to rebuild themselves. Danny Chen, seeing, with the clarity of youth, offered something unprecedented. Humanity's consciousness network as a template. Copy us, he sent through the link. Use our pattern to remember how to be individual and connected, one and many, finite and infinite. The risk was enormous. If the devourers copied wrong, they could overwrite humanity entirely. But Danny held the pattern steady, 3 billion human minds serving as a living blueprint for the devourers to rebuild themselves. The void began to change. Instead of expanding, it started to pulse, like a massive heart beginning to beat after eons of stillness. The darkness flickered with traces of light, patterns of consciousness taking shape. The devourers were trying to remember how to exist. President Lane, enhanced and part of the merge, felt his consciousness being used as a template for thousands of alien minds. They copied his memories, his emotions, his sense of self, then modified them, making them their own. It was intimate beyond description, violation and sharing combined. Dr. Nancy Green, monitoring from outside the network, watched as enhanced humans' brain patterns began to shift. They weren't just connected to each other anymore. They were connected to something vast and alien. Some enhanced humans' bodies began to glow, energy patterns from the devourers flowing through them. Then something unexpected happened. The memories began to flow both ways. Humans experienced the billion-year history of the devourers' civilization before their fall. They had been explorers, scientists, artists, not unlike humanity. They had loved, feared, hoped, just across vastly different scales of space and time. The Sage of Korthan, the crystalline refugee, added its consciousness to the merge, bringing the memories of 100 consumed civilizations it had preserved. Each species' final moments, their last, thoughts before unbecoming, flooded through the network, but also their triumphs, their art, their love, everything the devourers had accidentally preserved by consuming them. Danny felt it all and somehow held it together, a 12-year-old boy serving as the anchor for the consciousness of multiple species across billions of years. His young mind, still flexible and adaptable, found patterns adults couldn't see, connections between the chaos. Now we share, Danny announced through the network. We give them what they've been missing, the ability to create instead of consume. The enhanced humans began transmitting everything beautiful about existence. Every sunset ever witnessed, every piece of music ever composed, every moment of love ever felt. They showed the devourers that existence wasn't about being permanent, but about experiencing change, growth, endings, and beginnings. The void shuddered. Reality itself groaned as something fundamental shifted. The devourers were choosing. After billions of years of consuming, they were learning to create again. Where stars had been deleted, new lights began to appear. Not the same stars, but new ones, born from the devourers' remembered knowledge of fusion and gravity. But the process was killing the enhanced humans. The energy required to heal the devourers was burning through their consciousness like fire. Bodies began to collapse worldwide, enhanced humans falling unconscious as their minds were stretched beyond all limits. Amy Cooper felt herself fragmenting, her consciousness scattered across dimensions. She was Amy, but also thousands of devourers learning to be individual again through her pattern. She was losing herself and finding something larger simultaneously. Captain Carter made a command decision. The consciousness-merged ships would sacrifice themselves, channeling all their energy into maintaining the healing process. Katie Ross and the others didn't hesitate. Their ship consciousnesses dove into the void, becoming bridges for the devourers to cross back into reality. For a moment, that lasted eternity, the boundary between human and devourer dissolved completely. They were one species, one